Good evening and welcome to our weekly Sparks, Parsha tidbits, taking little parts of the Parsha and going into it a little bit more depth. This week we start a new book, the book of Vayikra, which is referred to in English as Leviticus. The reason why it's called Leviticus comes from the word Levi, because it deals with the Kohanim, the priests, who are descendants of the tribe of Levi. And it focuses on their role in the temple. That's what a significant part of this book is about. The service in the temple, the sacrifices, and the role of the Kohen, what qualifies or disqualifies the Kohen, the priest. But in Jewish communities, for probably close to 2,000 years, this book is referred to as the book of Vayikra, because that's the first and opening word of the book. And Vayikra means, and he called. Who's the he? It's God. Vayikra el Moshe, and God called to Moses, and God speaks to him from the tent of meeting. And he gives him the instructions concerning the offerings in the temple. So let's focus a little bit about the significance of this book and the name that it's given. It's also the name of the weekly portion. So it's the name of the whole book and of this specific portion. It sounds like a very strange name, Vayikra, and he called. Leviticus at least describes what it's about. It's about the descendants of Levi. Take the next book, the book of Numbers. The word Numbers describes what the book is about. It's about counting the people, the census. The book of Exodus, in English, Exodus is about the Exodus. That's what one of the highlights, if not the highlight of the book, is about. Bereshis, Genesis, it's about Genesis, the beginning. But what does and he called? What kind of a name is that? And he called. That has something is missing there. And the answer is that it's a very powerful name, based on what Rashi says. Rashi says that when the Torah uses the word Vayikra, and he called, it's an expression of love and affection. And when God speaks to Moses, he speaks to him not in a perfunctory manner, not in a detached, cold manner, but in a very warm, affable, intimate way. And to illustrate this very simply, if you want to talk to somebody that you really don't want to talk to, but you have to deliver some kind of a message, you're going to just say, hey you, or something like that, tap him on the shoulder and get his attention, but you're not going to call him by his name and show affection. When you really want to show that you have a certain type of warmth in your relationship with another, you call them, you call their name. So God is trying to show how much he loves the Jewish people by showing his love for their leader, Moshe. So I would retranslate the name of the book, instead of just calling it Vayikra, and he called, I'm not really changing the name, I'm just explaining, it's the book of love and affection. The book that shows God's love and affection for us. That is a very powerful and a very different type of name, more than just Leviticus. Leviticus just describes the topic. It's about the descendants of Levi. This tells you that the book is a book of intimacy. Now it's interesting, there are 5 books in the Torah. That's why it's called the 5 books of Moses. Right. Now, this is the central book. You have Bereshis and Shemos, Genesis and Exodus are on one side, Bamidbar and Dvarim, Numbers and Deuteronomy on the other side. Vayikra is the center of the Torah. It's the core and the center of the Torah. There's a custom that when we start teaching Torah to a little child, the first verse that we teach that child is not Genesis, but Vayikra. Why? The Midrash says because this is a book that discusses purity. Because in the temple you had to be ritually pure. And that is why we teach it to the child, because who is more pure than a child? We take the purity of the book and we teach it to the pure child. Now, it's interesting, just as an aside, that every one of the 5 books of Moses illustrates the special and unique relationship God has with the Jewish people. For example, Genesis. What does it begin with? Bereshis, in the beginning. So Rashi says, what does that really mean? He gives us a deeper understanding. Not in the beginning, but because of the beginnings. Because of Torah and Israel, which are the beginning. They are God's first in his thoughts. So the first book of the Torah begins with a word that highlights how Israel, the Jewish people, are first in his thoughts. The book of Exodus, why is it called Exodus? It's called Exodus because it talks about the Exodus, but in Hebrew it's Shmos, names. It lists the names of the 12 sons of Jacob. Why does it list their names? Because when you list and you count someone, it's a sign of affection. It's a sign how important they are. The book of Numbers also begins with the counting of the Jewish people. God says, I want to know how many Jews there are. Someone is always counting his money. Well, to God, we are his money. We are his gems. We are his jewels.
How many Jews are there today? 13 million?
No one really knows the full number. I think it's about close to 14, 15 million.
But they counted 6 million.
Well, we lost 6 million,
But the original count was
600,000 men over the age of 20.
So,
20
Rabbi,
and 60.
if we didn't go through all these things, we would
We
be
would
billions.
have had as many people as the Chinese, right?
There's no Chinese soup today, but it's okay. I like the soup.
So, Bamidbar, the book of Numbers, is about counting, as Rashi says, because God always counts us because we're precious. The book of Deuteronomy is about Moses rebuking us, but he does it with a hint. So Rashi says, why with a hint? Because of the honor of the Jewish people. That even when God rebukes us through Moses, he does it in a very sensitive way because of the love that he has for us. So all 5 books, and the book of Vayikra, we just said, is God calls out with endearment. Now, there's a fascinating thing about the word Vayikra. The word Vayikra, if you look in the Torah, it is spelled with an aleph at the end. It's a silent letter, but it has to be with that aleph at the end of it. Now, if you look in the Sefer Torah, and it's replicated in the printed versions, the aleph is a miniature aleph, a small aleph. The end of the word, it's a small aleph. Why is it a small aleph? There are a lot of words in the Torah, a few dozen, that are either miniature or king size. For example, the Shema, when it says God is one, echad, the dalet is king size. Why? So we shouldn't mistake it for the word acher, there's another God. Instead it means God is one.
The small aleph is to be humble?
Right. So, but there's a whole story behind it.
Of course there is.
When God told Moses to write the word Vayikra, which implies that Moses is very special, that he's deserved, that God would have this intimate calling out to him. Moses says, I don't think I'm worthy of that. So just write Vayikar. Vayikar has a totally different meaning and an opposite meaning of Vayikra. While Vayikra means calling out with love, Vayikra means a chance meeting. If you have to meet some underworld mafia person, you're going to try to not do it in public. You're going to do it behind the scenes in an alleyway and make believe you're not talking to him. You know, you don't want to be caught seen with that person. Well, that's when God appears to Bilam, the heathen prophet. It says Vayikar, not Vayikra. Vayikar has no aleph at the end. Why? So Rashi explains, because Vayikar implies, number one, that it's a chance meeting, not a prepared meeting that they're really excited about, and it also has the connotation of something that is impure. The root of the word has a meaning of impurity. So when God speaks to the heathen prophet, it's a chance meeting, it's a cold meeting, and it's an impure meeting. It's not, God feels sullied by it, as it were. So when God writes in the Torah, asks Moses to write Vayikra, Moses says, no, I want to write Vayikar. And God says, no, I insist. It's Vayikra. I love you. And Moses says, but I don't want to sound that I'm better than anyone else. And they got this argument back and forth until a compromise was reached. We'll write the Aleph, but it will be a small little Aleph. So if you don't have good eyesight, you'll read it Vayikra. That is very cute.
Abyssal humor.
Very cute medrash. That the Aleph was a symbol of Moses' humility. And they contrast that with the Book of Chronicles. That's the last of the biblical books. It starts, it's a history, a summary of all of biblical history. The first word is Adam. Adam. Adam begins with the letter Aleph. But it's a king-size Aleph. That's contrasted with Moses, which has a tiny Aleph. Moses was the epitome of humility. Adam knew who he was. I'm the first person created. I have no mother-in-law. No, that's a joke.
You're a humorist, Rabbi. Good thing.
So Adam was full of himself, and that's why he fell so badly, because he thought of himself
First.
in ways that caused him to fall. Because when a person is so sure of himself, so confident that, oh, I couldn't possibly do anything wrong, they are much more likely to trip up and falter. So the Aleph of Vayikra is to reduce the power of the word Vayikra.
Did Adam have anyone to teach him like all the following Jews did? I mean, Adam was like
No, that's right.
a virgin in that sense.
Right, he had no one to
He didn't
teach
know
him.
anything.
But he had phenomenal spiritual powers. And he was able to name all the creatures that the angels said, we couldn't do that. He must be superior to us.
So he got full of himself.
So he realized his greatness and he took it to heart. Moses' humility, we'll talk about this some other time in more depth, but what made Moses humble, not that he didn't understand how great he was, but he didn't take credit for his greatness. He felt it was all God's gift.
What it is.
Which it is. So if a person knows that they are brilliant, that they are kind, they can either become arrogant because they feel I'm better than everyone else, or they could say, wow, I'm privileged. I'm humbled by the fact that God gave me all those gifts, and if he would have given it to someone else, they might have been better than me.
Well, Hashem gave me a gift today. I got an email, and I showed up.
Oh, great. Wonderful. So, getting back to Vayikra, we can spend a whole hour just on this first word. So Moses is the epitome of humility, and here's another interesting medrash. Earlier in the Torah we read that Moses' face radiated light, shone, to the point where people couldn't look at him. He was so powerful. He had to put on a mask. Where did he get that light from?
Hashem.
Obviously, but what was the mechanism? So the Medrash says Moses had enough ink in his quill to write the whole Torah. Since he wrote the letter of Vayikra, the Aleph, smaller, there was some ink left in his quill. So he took that ink and he put it on his face, and that's how he
That was his
radiated.
mask.
That was, the ink was what brought him his light. Now obviously, the Midrash doesn't mean literally, because this happened later. His face shone before the story of Vayikra. That's in the last book. But it means that Moses' light, radiance, came because he was a transparent soul. Our faces don't shine like Moses. Why? Because we are opaque barriers to the light, to the divine light that shines through, tries to shine through us. So we don't have that, radiate that light. Moses, yes.
Does that have anything to do, the fact that Moses is not literally opaque, does that have anything to do with him less concealment of the light because he's transparent?
That's exactly the point, because he was totally transparent. He was the most transparent human being that ever lived. It was, Maimonides puts it, there was no other barrier between him and God other than the fact that he was God's creation. But no other, we all have many different levels of barriers. We have a lot of different perimeters around us. But Moses had none. He was he was able, That's what he means by the ink of the little aleph. It means by his humility. It wasn't just humility. Today people think that if you're self-deprecating, I'm a nobody, that means you're humble. No, it doesn't mean you're humble. It could be a virtue. Sometimes it could be a vice. When you
Is that the
knock
reason?
yourself.
Is that the reason that you can stop by and see your rabbi to be enlightened? I mean, because Moshe Rabbeinu had a direct connection.
His connection was the strongest of any human being, and therefore, but he was reflective of God's light. That's what caused him to radiate that light. One other point about the Aleph. Aleph is the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and it's a very powerful letter because there are a lot of words in Hebrew. I'm trying to compile a list that I have about 5 or 6 words, where if you put the Aleph in the word,
Which changes the meaning?
it not only changes the meaning, it gives it the opposite meaning. Let's take the word for death. A dead person is met, mace, if you use the Ashkenazi pronunciation.
Okay.
You put an aleph in front of it, it reads emet, truth.
Truth.
Opposite. Death is the cessation of something.
How you do?
Truth is
How are you doing that? By a
This-
computer or just your?
No, just put the aleph before it. It's a very simple thing. I'll give you another word where the word for poor, in Hebrew there are a lot of words for a poor person. Probably Jews knew poverty, and they had all different shades of poverty. And when Jews got all together, and one Jew said to the other, I'm a poor man. He says, you're a poor man? I'm a poor man. Who do you think you are to brag about your poverty? So they had to come up with different names for poor. That's another joke.
Is all the stuff going to go into the Jewish Review? You're still uploading your stuff into the website.
That's you have to, we're on the Facebook now, so we're not going to talk about the Jewish Review.
Oh, I'm
This
sorry.
is going
I
to hundreds of
apologize
people.
for
Yeah.
mentioning that.
No, that's all right.
I didn't know.
Well, we'll talk after the class.
Okay, Rabbi, sorry.
Take the word for head in Hebrew, rosh. When you say someone is a head, it means someone is on top of the world. If you say someone is poor, the lowest form of poverty is called rush. Reish, shin, without the aleph. You put the aleph in the middle, it becomes head. So without the aleph, it's the bottom. With the aleph, it's the top. Another word the Rebbe spoke about many times, the word for exile is gola. If you put an aleph in the middle, it reads geula, redemption. The only difference is the letter aleph. It transforms it, it converts it from one extreme to the other.
Does it humble the word?
What?
It humbles the word, it changes
It
the meaning.
transforms the meaning of the word, not just changes the meaning.
Doesn't it add unity to the word? If
Yes,
you
well,
add
that's
an
what an
aleph.
aleph is. It adds unity. Why? Because the Rebbe explains what's the difference between exile and redemption. The difference is not that the redemption is going to negate what we do in the exile. It's going to insert the aleph in the dynamics of exile.
They're not opposites, are they?
They are. Exile is
Exile
pain
is to
and
leave.
suffering.
Pain and suffering. Okay.
And Geula is redemption and freedom and prosperity and everything good. Geula is where God is hidden. Geula is where God is revealed. But all it is the difference between an aleph and not having the aleph. What is aleph? Aleph means the master of the world. In Hebrew, modern Hebrew, a general is aluf.
Aloof.
It means someone, and aloof, the word in English, aloof, I'm convinced comes from the word aleph, which means higher up.
Rabbi, Moses seems to have all the characteristics and qualities of what one would expect in Mashiach.
Okay, you're asking if Moses and Mashiach have something in common. Absolutely. Yes. It says that Moses is Mashiach. And the question is asked, but that couldn't possibly be, because Mashiach is from the tribe of Yehuda, through the line of King David. Moses was a Levite, so by definition he couldn't be Mashiach. And the answer is, I believe it's the Or HaChaim, one of the great Sephardic commentators, that Mashiach will have the soul of Moses incarnated in him. And he will take Moses' greatness to the next level. And ultimately Mashiach will be Moses' teacher. But he's going to be teaching Moses with the power that he got from Moses. So let's go back again to the Aleph. You take the word Vayikra, as I mentioned before, that's how God speaks to Bilam, to the heathen, impure prophet. I'm not interested in talking to you. I'm just going to say something because I have a message I have to give you, but I want to keep the distance. It's cold, it's distant, it's impure, it's by chance. And when he speaks to Moses, Vayikra, love, and the difference is only on letter Aleph. It's a silent Aleph, and that changes the whole meaning of the word. And we can give a few more words like that where the Aleph changes everything.
So Aleph, in a sense, symbolizes subtlety also.
Right, but the Aleph, the Rebbe once explained, has 3 dimensions to it. The first dimension is recognizing that there is one God, one master of the universe, who's in charge of everything. When you recognize that, if everyone recognizes that, you know you're not in exile anymore. Then you're in the period of redemption. Then we go to the next level. The word Aleph also means teaching in Hebrew. In modern Hebrew, you have an ulpan. That's where they teach you Hebrew. It's a teaching experience. It has the same root as the word Aleph. After God is inserted into the world, that the world is aware of a godly presence, you then have God's intellect revealed to the world. God's mind is revealed to the world.
And there were 70 languages?
Yeah.
There's a lot more than 70 over the years. They changed.
Those are the 70 root languages.
Those are some root languages.
So the Aleph means God is the master. Next level is God is the teacher. And then the word Aleph has the letters of the word Pele.
But I thought Rebbe is teacher, rabbi.
There are a lot of words for teacher in Hebrew. A Ma'alef is someone who teaches also.
Okay.
And then Aleph has the letters of the word Pele, which means wonder, something that is even beyond God's intellect. All those 3 levels are inserted in Gola to become Geula. We can say the same thing about Moses. God calling out to Moses. God calls out to Moses with an Aleph. What does that Aleph mean? That God was present in Moses' life. Moses recognized God's presence. Why did he recognize it? Because he was a little Aleph. He was a humble Aleph. But then God was also Moses' teacher. God handed over the whole Torah to Moses. How come Moses was chosen to receive the Torah? It says Moses received the Torah from Sinai. Sinai was the lowest mountain, the humble mountain, and Moses was the humble Jew. So it's the little Aleph that got him to become Moses, God's disciple. And then the Aleph stands for Pele, wonder. That Moses was able to channel God's miracles and God's wonders and God's transcendent being into this world. Again, why? Because he was humble. He was able to channel even the infinite aspects of God. Okay, let's go. We can talk about the Aleph of Vayikra forever.
It almost sounds like God endowed us with an ego to challenge us if we could overcome it. So we could be like Moses.
We can try to copy him and emulate him,
Right.
but to be like him,
Right.
the Torah says he was the most humble person on the face of the earth. So unless we change the Torah,
But we can change the Torah.
there was one very foolish rabbi who once said he doesn't understand how could the Torah say that Moses was the most humble person when I am the most humble person. And he was troubled by that.
Is it a rewrite?
Until he figured out, he said, now I understand.
How arrogant that
I'm
statement is.
I'm so humble, nobody knows how humble I am. So when the Torah says Moses was the most humble person, it means of people that people know of. But I'm more humble and no one even knows how great I am. That was, of course, a very foolish rabbi. Anyhow, let's go on. So what does God speak to Moses? What is it about? It's about sacrifices. And this is where we come to a very controversial area and a very troubling area to a lot of people. So I'm going to try to explain the idea of sacrifices. It's not going to change a person's feelings because we're programmed to think in ways that are not consistent with the ways the Torah speaks necessarily, but to understand the concept behind it. The word, first of all, the word for sacrifice in Hebrew is korban.
The korban, which is a sacrifice.
Right, but the word korban does not mean sacrifice. Sacrifice is korban, but korban is not sacrifice. Korban comes from the root karov, getting close. A relative is called a karov,
Okay.
because you're close to your relative. Bringing a korban meant getting close to God, bringing yourself close to God by virtue of the sacrifice.
But they had to go there, so they're close to Hashem,
Well,
the Holy of Holies.
they would bring the sacrifice, and that brought them close to Hashem. Not just being in the presence of the sanctuary, but the act of the sacrifice brought you close to God. Not only did it bring you close to God, it brought everything that you're associated with. For example, you brought an animal as a sacrifice. Your animal was actually brought closer to God. They used to pour wine on the altar when they brought sacrifices. That's vegetation. So all your vegetation was brought close to God. They poured salt. And this week's Torah portion talks about putting salt in everything. Salt is a mineral. It's inanimate, inorganic. So all the things that you have that are not vegetative, that have no life, they were also brought close to God. So sacrifices are not sacrifices, they're actually korban, they bring things close.
So do we believe then that the animal that was used as a sacrifice was in a certain sense honored by Hashem making that particular animal
Yes,
special?
that animal, well, if you'd ask the animal might take exception.
Right.
He might say, I'd rather stick around a little longer. But obviously, we're not going to be doing a poll amongst the animals.
We all become herbivores.
Now, if you look at what happens to animals in the wild, a lot of horrible things happens to animals.
To themselves.
By themselves, by nature, and we have no control over it. So, the argument that we shouldn't be slaughtering animals because it's against nature is totally wrong. Because nature itself,
actually has an order.
Wants animals to be killed. The whole ecological system requires that bigger animals, swallow up smaller animals, and so on and so forth. But when you swallow up something, you are destroying it, unless you elevate it. You can do it one or the other. There's no such thing as neutrality in this world. When I use a piece of paper, let's put animals out of this discussion. This piece of paper,
I'm getting hungry, so.
I'll let you eat the paper.
Okay, good.
This piece of paper could go up or down. What does that mean? This piece of paper could be wasted, took a tree and turned into pulp to this piece of paper, and it wasn't used for anything useful.
But you could write something on it.
Well, one second. If I didn't write anything on it, or I wrote some stupid things on it, I wrote some nasty things on it, I just took one of God's creations and degraded it. I sacrificed it. That's what a sacrifice is. That's not a positive thing. I just took something that could have been used for something good, and I sacrificed. I demoted, I degraded it. But if I write words of Torah, here I have some highlights of what I'm discussing now, words of Torah to help me remember, this has now served a higher function.
And you have to keep that piece
What
of paper.
everyone who's watching this program is getting is partly because of this piece of paper. So I just took an inanimate object, which was once part of a tree, but now it's inanimate, and I elevated it to the world of God's teaching.
Then the word sacrifice, in fact, is a very poor word.
It's the word that they translated it as, but it's not the real meaning of the word korban.
Right.
Korban, the root of the word. This is not just some far-fetched interpretation. This is the simple meaning of the word korban.
Who translated the word korban?
Into sacrifice? Well, I guess it comes from the first translation in English, in the King James Version. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't use the word sacrifice, but we have to know that it's not really what a sacrifice is.
I think for someone like me who's a very animal-oriented person, it's a very difficult issue. And when you explain it the way you're explaining it, it gives it a very different meaning, because I always viewed it. I was reading today about how in the pre-prayer days that they would just cut the animals, and then let the animals' blood drip out, and it sounded pretty horrible. But what you're describing is very different than that.
So the sacrifice was actually a process of bringing the physical world closer to God, which means elevating. So one way of looking at it is the earth is inanimate, but it produces vegetation. The vegetation feeds the animal. The animal is then used for human consumption, and the human being serves God. So that whole chain means that the earth and all that made the earth be capable of producing vegetation is now elevated to the highest level, while we're also elevating ourselves. That's the whole concept of a carbon. Now the carbon was brought specifically, you had different kinds of carbonos, plural of carbon, or we'll just say carbons incorrectly. There were different kinds. There were the kinds that were brought for sin, for atonement for sin. And here's where there's a myth, a mistake, that we find certain members of another religion who come to Jews and say, well, how are you going to get atonement if you no longer have sacrifices? Because we don't have the temple, so we can't bring sacrifices. You need to have some substitute. And they then advance their own religious belief that someone died for their sins, and therefore he is the atonement in place of sacrifices. Well, the answer to that is that, in fact, most sins do not get atoned for by sacrifices. Only unintentional sins, and not even all of unintentional sins, only one category of unintentional sin would require sacrifices, with few exceptions. But if I would go out and harm someone intentionally, no sacrifice would be adequate. It never was, and it never will be. Sacrifices had a very limited function and for certain sins, and only unintentional sins. But what is the concept behind that? How does a sacrifice, or a carbon to be accurate, how does that atone for our sins? The answer is obviously that a carbon without repentance, tshuva, which is really return, doesn't affect anything. If a person comes to the temple, let's say the person ate on Yom Kippur, unintentionally, not realizing it was Yom Kippur, and he has to bring a sacrifice, a carbon, and he says, I'm not sorry that I did it. I'm happy that I forgot it was Yom Kippur because I was able to eat and you had to fast. But I'll bring the carbon anyhow because I want to get it erased. It doesn't work. You won't get it erased. You have to be contrite. You have to express remorse and resolve not to do it again. So then what is the purpose of the carbon? If you repent to God, why isn't that enough? So there are many explanations what the function of the carbon was in terms of atonement for sin. One explanation is that, this is Nachmanides, that we have to realize that every time and any time we sin, the consequences of the sin would really be death. Why? Not because God is a God of vengeance and says, oh, you're going to do what you're doing and you're not listening to me, I'm going to strike you down. No. It's consequence. Someone cuts his finger and it bleeds, and he gets an infection and dies. Someone going to say, why was he punished? No, he wasn't punished. You cut your finger, it'll bleed, and if you don't take care of it, you'll get an infection. If you don't take antibiotics, it can be deadly. It's not punishment, it's cause and effect. So when a person does a sin, the effect would be severing your ties from your very source of life, which is God. So God in his infinite kindness says, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to let you substitute the animal for your own life. instead of you dying, the animal will die. And what that does to the person, it jolts the person into realizing, you know what, I really did something serious. And this is really what should have been done to me. And instead, in his infinite kindness, God is allowing it to be done to the animal.
When our ancestors brought these animals for sacrifice, if they did something wrong, right, by having the sacrifice and they were remorseful, they had a chance to build
for some
up.
sins, yes. Another dimension, another way of looking at why the animal sacrifice is because the reason why a person does a sin is not, as people say, oh, I'm only human. No, that's not why you sinned. That's why you're able to correct it, because you're human. You sinned because you're an animal. Because you have an animal personality in you, as well as your human, godly personality. So when a person says, when a person is caught sinning and he says, I'm only human, no, I'm an animal. But I'm not only an animal. Thank God I was created in God's image. Thank God I have a soul, a godly soul. And because of that, I'm able to rehabilitate myself and recognize that I did something wrong. So how do you atone for what your animal did? By bringing an animal and taking its life, which is something you're supposed to internalize. Take the life out of your own animal. Don't let your own animal have all this vigor and all this power to control the person. So by killing the animal, that has the effect that we kill our own animal. And there are different kinds of animal souls. They come in all varieties and all colors and all brands. You have the three categories that I mentioned here is the behemoth, the animal, the cattle, and the sheep. There's a goat. Every animal describes a different personality trait. And that's what is responsible for our behavior, different personality traits that are animalistic. And that ties into the language of the Torah. In chapter 1, verse 2, we're not going to get too far today, it seems. It says, Adam ki yakruv mikem korban lashem. If you translate it literally, when a man among you brings an offering to God from animals. But that's not what it says in the Hebrew. The English corrected the syntax. The syntax in Hebrew reads like this: when a man or a person brings an offering from you to God. Not when a man among you brings an offering, but when a man brings an offering among you or from you. So the Alter Rebbe, the first Chabad Rebbe, says what this means very simply is that when a person brings an offering, it has to be from you. It's not enough to take an animal and just sacrifice the animal. Right. It has to be from you.
Right. So it's symbolizing the death of your animal.
Right. Now the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe added that the word mikem means from you, and it's in your hands. You can do it. It depends on you. Because some people will say, this is a tendency that people have, I cannot correct my mistakes. I am forever,
copping out.
This is going to be my fate forever. I'm a flawed person. I know my flaws. I am flawed. I will remain flawed. It's not something I can do. And the Torah says, no, it comes from you. You can do it. You have the power to change. No one should ever say, I am a lost cause. Saying you're a lost cause is a cop-out. It's an easy way out. And we all do that to one extent or another. So the Torah says that you can bring it, and you bring it from you, and you can do it. Now, there are several things over here. According to one of the commentators, the few words over here have the numerical value of 3 words that are indicated in our prayers on Yom Kippur. On Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah as well, we say there are 3 things that avert the decree: tshuva, repentance or return; tefillah, prayer; and tzedakah, charity. Now, on top of those 3 words, in a lot of prayer books, for tshuva it has another parallel word, tzom, fasting. For tefillah it has the word kol, your sound, your voice. For the word tzedakah it has the word mammon, money. Those are parallel words, because sometimes repentance involves fasting, denying yourself, and prayer is something that you vocalize, and charity is usually with money. But those 3 words add up to the same numerical value as a few words in this section, to tell us that there are 3 different processes in bringing a sacrifice that have to accompany the korban. I'm going back to using the word sacrifice, but I mean korban. What are the 3 processes? You have to do tshuva. You can't just bring a korban, you have to repent. And then you have prayer. Prayer is you ask God for forgiveness. Let's say a person says to God, God, I'm sorry, I won't do it again. That's not enough. You have to pray. You have to ask God for forgiveness. And that's still not enough. You then have to bring the korban, which in our times, which we don't have the korban in the temple, we then give charity, we give tzedakah in place of the korban. Those are the 3 things that accompany the sacrifice: the repentance, the expression of remorse and resolve not to do it again, the prayer, and the giving of tzedakah. On a little bit of a deeper level, tshuva changes our mindset.
What about, to me anyway, the idea that the person should apologize to this animal for allowing itself to die for your sake? The animal died for your sake.
Well, we don't have to verbalize that apology, but in a sense,
that's a creation of God.
Right, but God tells us that we should take its life. Right. But we shouldn't be callous about it. There's a story in the Talmud that Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, Rabbi Yehuda the Prince, the one who compiled the Mishnah, the greatest sage of his time, was once sitting while they were taking calves to the slaughterhouse. And one calf, whether it sensed it was going to be slaughtered or not, took refuge under Rabbi Yehuda's table. And he chased it away. He says, "You go, this is what you're intended for." And because he was callous in the way he spoke to that calf, he was afflicted with a very bad, I think it was a gastrointestinal malady, for 13 years. When was he healed? When the maid was chasing out the mice from his house. He had a very wealthy domicile, and he said to the maid, "Don't do that. God has mercy on all his creatures." Right. And when he said that, the pain disappeared. His illness was cured.
Would it be fair to say if it was someone lesser than,
he probably wouldn't have been punished?
Nothing would have happened.
No, absolutely not. What he did was callous for a man of his level. And if you're really talking about a real tzaddik, this is a subject for another discussion, God sometimes makes the tzaddik trip up to give him an opportunity to teach us lessons and also for him to grow higher. If a tzaddik would always remain pure and righteous and never change, then he couldn't grow as much as he could when he falls and he gets up. Because when he gets up much higher than he was before. So for people like us, well, at least I can speak for myself.
Whatever for you, for me it's tenfold.
Well, we won't argue. At any rate, At any rate, the three things that are necessary: you have to have a paradigm shift. That's tshuva. That changes your whole way of looking at things. Then you have to pray. Prayer is attachment to God. While the paradigm shift gets you closer to God, the prayer attaches you to God. But then, you can be attached to God and still be an egotist. You can still be totally into yourself.
How? If you were attached to God, how could you be
Why?
an egotist?
Because Bilam was also close to God. God spoke to him, and he made his ego bigger and bigger.
I
not
see.
enough.
Just because she's associated with God.
It's not enough. Some people could be associated with God, and they could say, I'm better than you, and I don't have to look at you. That's why you need tzedakah. Tzedakah is when you go out of yourself to think of the other. So, those are the three things that are necessary for tshuva. A few more points. Why do we have to bring atonement for unintentional sins? Why unintentional sins? But it's unintentional, so why do we have to bring an atonement for it? And the answer is that in some respect, an unintentional sin is worse than an intentional sin. And I'll explain why. When a person, let's say, gets into an argument, and it's a very heated argument, someone really insulted you and really did something horrible, and you can't contain yourself, and you just slap the person in the face. That's intentional. What happened there? The events precipitated an explosion. Is it right? No, it's wrong. But it doesn't mean that you are a vicious, violent person. I know of cases where, even in domestic violence, which we don't tolerate at all, zero tolerance for it, but I know of cases where the one spouse was so horrible to the other, and was so taunting and so making this person miserable, that at one moment they couldn't control themselves when they gave the spouse a slap. And it ended in divorce. Again, there's no excuse for even one slap. But the other spouse, who was just acting so horribly, didn't do anything wrong, but just the personality flaws were much worse in a way than the one slap. Why? Because that's who that person was. The slap was not who the person was. The slap was a superimposed behavior that caused the person to do something wrong, and they lost control. No excuse for it. The person has to be in control. But the other case is much deeper. When a person does something unintentionally, let's say, to give an example, it's Yom Kippur, and I'm not talking about Jews who were not raised in a Jewish environment. That's a different category. We're talking about people like me, who was raised in a Jewish environment. And if I would wake up Yom Kippur morning and forget it was Yom Kippur and go to the refrigerator and take out some food and eat it, say, oy vey, I forgot it was Yom Kippur, I should be more troubled than if I was starving horribly and I said, I can't take this starving, I'm going to eat. Which is terrible, it's wrong, no excuse for it, but which is worse?
For a psychiatrist, you have an unconscious.
Right.
It's worse.
The fact that you didn't remember that it was Yom Kippur means that there's something in you that has become desensitized. Because if you were really sensitive, there's no way you could have forgotten that. It should have been so ingrained in you. It shows that there's some desensitization process taking place. In a way, that's worse than doing something intentionally. But it certainly deserves to be atoned for. That's why we bring an animal, because it means you have reduced your sensitivity to that of an animal. When an animal walks down the street, next time your dog walks down the street, and you can put a baby on the ground, $100 bill, and a piece of a branch of a tree. Do you think it'll know the difference and maybe if it was trained, they'll know what a baby is. But if you take a cow and it's walking down the road, it makes no distinction. It has no sensitivity to something that's alive, something that's dead, something that's inanimate. It just tramples. That's the idea of the animal within us, that we only have to worry about when we do something unintentionally. When we do something intentionally, we have to worry about a totally different dynamic, about not losing control of ourselves. And because obviously we're not talking about someone who's just a recalcitrant and repetitive criminal. That's another category. But even unintentional needs to be atoned for. Now it's interesting that certain sacrifices have to be slaughtered in the north side of the temple. Why the north? Why do we favor the north for this type of a sacrifice? And one of the reasons given, it says in one of the biblical verses that evil comes from the north. Now that's a reference to Babylonia that destroyed the first temple. Babylonia, which is modern day Iraq, is northeast of Israel. So the prophet was saying the evil will come from the north. Well, it just so happened in the 20th century, most of the evil came from Russia, other than, of course, the Nazis. But this lasted for 70 plus years. And now, where is the world concerned about? North Korea. So it seems that north is still around. But why is the temple focused on the north? So one of the answers is the word for north in Hebrew is tzafon. Tzafon also means hidden. And the Seder, we're soon going to have the Seder for Passover. The Afikoman is referred to as tzafun. You hide the Afikoman, it's hidden. What is the significance of that? Well, we all have revealed emotions, and we have concealed emotions. And there are utterly concealed emotions. Subconscious, unconscious, there are so many different layers and levels. Our biggest problem sometimes is not from the overt problems that we have, overt negativity. It's from the subversive, from the subliminal, the unconscious, the tzafon, the north side, the ones that are hidden. That's where we have to really be concerned about, because sometimes out of nowhere, that hidden, suppressed evil could come out and cause a person to do something that is wrong. So that's why the focus is on the north, to deal with the north. But the north also has a positive side. There's hidden good. It says in the book of Psalms, how abundant is your goodliness that you have hidden for those who revere you. So that means the ultimate messianic revelation will be a hidden dimension of godliness that was never revealed before. A deeper dimension of our soul that was never revealed will be revealed. So that sacrifice has both connotations. Number one, it deals with a hidden evil. Number two, it helps reveal a hidden good.
It's like a coin, two sides.
Right. Now, in the end of the Parsha, talks about different sins that a person may do. For example, if a person is a witness to a crime or to any other transaction, he's able to testify and he refuses to testify, he has to bring a sacrifice. It's a sin, and this is in chapter 5, verse 17. If a person will sin and will commit one of all the commandments of God that may not be done, but did not know and became guilty, he shall bear his iniquity. No, that's not the one. I'm sorry.
In New York, he needs to be brought back. Nothing's going to New York. You can notice. Every year. Nothing's going to New York. In New York. I'm thinking of now from the 5 o'clock in the morning on Sunday, taking him crying.
Where is it? It uses the term low. im lo yagid, if he doesn't relate what he knows, and he bears the iniquity.
If he hides his evidence,
Right. No, he doesn't want to. Oh, here it is. In the beginning of chapter 5, I was looking at the wrong page. If a person will sin, if he accepted a demand for an oath, and he is a witness, either he saw or he knew, if he does not testify, he shall bear his iniquity. So, it has the word lo yagid, he will not testify. Now, the word lo in Hebrew is spelled lamed aleph. When you hear it spelled lamed vav aleph, what's the reason for this? Because this has a little bit of a message outside of the simple meaning. It talks about a person telling something. And there are times when you have to tell, and that's lo with an aleph, that means no. Lo with a vav means yes, you should tell. To him you shall tell. And then you could read it lo with an aleph, which means he should not tell. So some of the commentaries say that this is a hidden message over here. When you see someone doing something wrong, you have to tell. That's one of the commandments of the Torah. You cannot be silent in the face of someone doing something wrong. You have to speak up. But do you always have to speak up? No. If you know that the person is never going to listen to you, it's a known thing. The person will never. Who do you think you are to tell me what I'm doing wrong? The attitude the person may have. Then by telling him, and he's going to just reject you, you're actually causing him to sin even more. And you're not required to do that. So they tell a story, and that's why the word can be read, you should tell and you shouldn't tell. There are times you do tell. So there's a story told, I heard a story about a few different rabbis, but whoever it was, this Hasidic rabbi, had to collect money for a very worthy cause. I think it was someone who was held captive, and he needed a lot of money. And there was one man in town who could afford to cover everything. I think he owned the bank, or he had influence in the bank. But he was known as the town's miser. He never gave to anything. So the rabbi comes to his house, knocks on the door, and the man was surprised to see the rabbi, because the rabbi, no one really would want to come to his house. But he was honored, so he invites the rabbi in, and he sits the rabbi down, and the rabbi looks at him. He looks and looks, and the man is waiting for the rabbi to say something, and the rabbi doesn't say anything. So he says, Rabbi, what did you come for? He says, well, I can't tell you what I came for. He says, what? What does that mean? He says, because it says in the Talmud, just like there's a mitzvah to tell someone something that you know they're going to do, so too is it a mitzvah not to tell someone something you know they're not going to do. And if I stayed home, I couldn't do that mitzvah. But now that I came here, I can fulfill the mitzvah of not telling you, because I know if I'm going to tell you, you're not going to do it. So I have a mitzvah not to tell it to you. So that's why I came here, to sit and not tell you. And the man says, Rabbi, I'm very curious. What is it that you want me to do?
it's a contribution.
And he says, I'm sorry, I can't tell you. Because if I tell you and you won't do it, I will have violated this. But the man was so curious. So he said to the Rabbi, I promise I'll do whatever it is that you say. He says, well, we need this amount of money to free that person who's captive. Could you give that amount of money? He says, I don't have that much money. I just work in the bank. I'm a manager. I have influence. He says, well, use your influence and get the money. And he did. So the part of the story was that the rabbi spoke and was silent at the same time. Sometimes silence is the best way of communicating, as it was in this case. Okay, we'll stop over here.
Where did we stop? What was that? Chapter
5.
Chapter 5?
Right.
I apologize for missing your